I talk a lot about the power of blog posts, but podcasts are actually more convenient for your followers because they can listen while they're driving, working out, or just doing chores around the house. Podcasts are a great way to build a genuine connection with your audience, position your agency, build awareness, and create prospect leads. There's also a lot of unexplored space in the podcasting world. According to Google in 2021, there were 6 million blogs, 37 million YouTube channels, but only 850,000 active podcasts. So today I will walk you through conceptualizing, equipment, recording, post-production, and promotion so that your organization can take full advantage of this incredible promotional and positioning opportunity. Before we dig in, please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, click the bell, because we have some really cool stuff lined up for the next couple of weeks. Step 1 is conceptualizing, and ideally your podcast should reflect something your agency is passionate about and feel will assist others by hearing. Or perhaps you have experts or professionals in a field that you have some valuable information. Or maybe you have some amazing stories and can entertain and inspire people. Some podcasts just have a single host or multiple hosts or scripted stories or feature in-depth interviews. And podcasts are as varied as the people that create them. There are many other concepts, but obviously you are watching this video because you have an idea for one. And shoot me a comment. I'd like to know what you're up to. Now, the first thing we always ask a client who would like us to help them build a podcast is, why are you starting a podcast? What is the purpose and the goal? And what will your podcast be about? Which sounds pretty obvious, but the brainstorming portion with the team and writing it down really helps flesh out the rest of the conceptualizing process. You can also search your show's topic in Apple or Google Podcasts to see if there are already podcasts in that genre. And if there are, listen to a handful of episodes to see what they're doing well and think about ways that you could do it better or different. I followed this process for fundraising podcasts and found that there are a lot of great podcasts already out there and decided that YouTube was the medium for me. Now, my sister started a true crime podcast, went through the process, and even though there's a lot of competition, she found a way to create her own unique hook, and it's been quite successful. Now, naming your podcast. When picking a podcast name, try to pick something that's catchy and memorable and that will rank for your podcast relevant keywords. Most podcast platforms use title, author, and description fields in their search results. So much like anything else that is SEO related, you want to use highly searched terms. This is the metadata for your podcast. And along with your podcast artwork is your product packaging and can affect whether your podcast shows up in relevant searches and how likely users are to subscribe to it. So use keywords in your name, but without keyword stuffing. You don't want to stuff your title with keywords, but you do want to make it easy for people to find your podcast. If you have a 1 or 2 word podcast name, then add a brief description in the title tag to help search results. Now, optimum podcast length. Don't let people tell you there is an optimum length for a podcast episode. You'll find shows that are 10 minutes to 2 hours per episode. Your podcast should be as long as it needs to be without being any longer. And publishing schedule. Podcasting can be a full-time job or something you just do on the side. If it's the latter, you can have a more relaxed publishing schedule. Now, you might decide to publish every day or publish a podcast series once a year, but ideally to start, you do want to publish about 3 times a week for the first 2 months, but once a week will also work. It just means slower growth. And here's a tip. iTunes will allow a new podcast 8 weeks to sit on their new and noteworthy section, making it super important that your content be consistent and that you have enough volume to attract new listeners. Once you have some new episodes uploaded, make sure to get the support from your friends and followers by asking them to download those new episodes. Step 2 is setting up your channel and channel artwork. Every podcast is listed with an album cover. Now, many shows use the same channel artwork as their episode artwork. And if you're using a separate artwork for episodes, here are some extra tips. And there's technical specifications. Apple Podcast artwork requirements are a square image, 3000 by 3000 in PNG or JPEG format, and a color space of RGB. Now, 5 tips to make your podcast artwork stand out is podcast artwork should visually communicate the subject of the podcast. You should also design a variety of sizes for social media posts, website banners, etc. And don't use too many words in the artwork, and avoid microphones and headsets and those other overused images. But most importantly, be consistent. Your podcast artwork is part of your overall branding, and it should be high quality and consistent with the other imagery that you're using amongst all your platforms. Now, if you have a design background, great. If not, we always recommend Canva. In fact, you can try a free trial of their pro version, and I'll link that in the description. Writing a description for your podcast, a podcast channel description, and episode descriptions are considered metadata, as I've explained before. And meta information should contain your keywords. So once again, it's important to have a basic understanding of keyword research and SEO. And if you want a little bit more information on that, I'll link a video that I did up here. Step 3 is equipment and software. Now, podcasting has a very low barrier for entry. If you want to start a podcast, it's relatively easy to begin the process with little overhead or experience. And picking the best podcasting setup can be confusing. So to make it easier, I put together a list of some podcast equipment, again in the description. And just a disclaimer, these are affiliate links. So if you do purchase them, I receive a small commission, but it goes to support our channel. Now, I just want to quickly explain the difference between some of the mics, because condenser mics pick up more background sound and are best suited for quieter environments, while dynamic mics will sound better in less than perfect recording situations, and they're better if you have multiple people speaking. But do your research and pick what's right for you. Typically, you will need a microphone with a foam ball, noise-canceling headphones, a pop filter, a computer and a laptop, and possibly noise-reducing panels for your walls. You will also require editing and recording software. Now, Audacity is my favorite. It's free and easy to use. GarageBand is also great and comes pre-installed on Apple computers. And Zoom has become one of the go-to platforms for podcasting, primarily because of its above-average audio quality and ease of use for remote podcast interviews. Step 4, recording your podcast. Aside from using the right equipment, we always recommend creating an outline. Rambling is one of the most common mistakes new podcasters make, and the best way to fight this tendency is to write a podcast outline. You don't have to write out the podcast verbatim, but taking 15 minutes to jot down a list of bullet points will make a drastic improvement in the flow of the episode. And if you're working with a co-host, share the outline with them so you can work on it together. Now that you'll both be on the same page, you can prevent the rambling. Here are some basic tips for recording your podcast. You want to record in a small, quiet room. If you can't get the quiet you need, record under a blanket or invest in some sound panels. Record with your headphones on, and your guests should have their headphones on too. Stay hydrated. Watch your volume levels. Red is bad. Watch your breath. Keep your body still. And another cool tip is you can leave audio cues for mistakes. So when I'm shooting my YouTube videos, if I make a mistake, I'll go like that so I can pick up the little noise bounce and know exactly where to edit. Also beware of microphone techniques. We've all heard those explosive pops or the cringy S sound. Excessive bursts of air hitting the microphone is what causes this. So you want to make sure that you're positioned appropriately and pointing in the right direction. Have all your setup perfect. Editing is where things get real. It's easy to get caught up on the idea of recording a podcast and then quickly lose steam when things get too technical or just plain difficult. The editing process is where we're going to remove all those audible distractions, insert our extras like pre-recorded ads, voiceovers, intros, outros, music, and with the help of the right software and a few pointers, even the not so technically inclined can create a quality, well-edited podcast. And here's a tip. Even the best podcasters had to start somewhere with a few bad episodes. Watch my YouTube videos and you will see that it has been a work in progress. I'm sure that a year from now, I'm going to watch this and probably cringe. And just some tips around choosing your podcast theme song. If you decide to do an intro, you'll probably want some music. When you're looking for music, search for royalty-free music that you can use. Otherwise, you're going to have to purchase your show's music. And we use Artlist. I have a yearly subscription and I like them because I pay annually, but I keep the music rights even after I cancel. Just be sure to read the fine print because some of the monthly services transfer the rights back to them after you cancel the service. And use post-production elements sparingly. Sound effects have their place. Step 6 is saving, exporting, and posting. Once you've finished editing your podcast, export it from your editing software. Most podcasters export their episodes as MP3s to ensure compatibility with most of the podcasting apps. Set your bit rates, 96 kbps mono for spoken word and 192 kbps stereo for podcasts that feature music. Now, there are some benefits to tagging your audio files with ID3 tags, and these tags make sure that your media player has the correct information about the episode. And currently, most podcast episodes or most podcast apps get this information from our RSS feeds, but it might get lost when somebody shares the audio file by itself. Now, publishing your podcast is easy once you get to know the process. You can publish directly to Google, Apple, Spotify, etc., or you can use a podcast host service like Buzzsprout or Podbean, which gives you integration with all of the directories, meaning you can do it all from one dashboard. Each individual directory or directory host has slightly different processes, but some of the basics include picking a category for your podcast. It's important to optimize how your podcast appears. One way of doing this is to pick the right podcast category for your show. Same with choosing a title. And think about it. Every single article, book, news headline, and Facebook status begins with a short phrase intended to captivate our attention. This is the first trick to getting listeners in the podcast world and a skill you're going to need to strengthen. Same with writing show notes. Filling out these fields help make your show visible on the different platforms, Apple, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever your podcast listeners search for your show's genre. A good episode description is essential for success. It's the space where you explain what your show is about in one paragraph, and make sure you're telling your readers what's in it for them, and make it entertaining too, so it'll encourage people to subscribe. Step 7, promote it. You probably don't have a community that's already waiting for your podcast when you first launch, so it's essential to leverage existing communities. Share, share, share. Share your podcast with your friends, your family. Your podcast will thrive on downloads. So take the ball into your court and share with as many people as humanly possible. Post it on social media. Send out email blasts. Post it on your website. You can also find groups of people who share the same interest and tell them about your podcast. My sister has been doing some collabs with her podcast and other shows, doing show takeovers, and that's really helped her to build some relationships within the community. I found a new favorite podcast because of that through her channel, and she's gained a lot more followers on hers. So that was some of the quick basic information on starting a podcast for your organization. And as always, please feel free to comment, email, give me a call. I'm always happy to talk with nonprofit organizations. So once again, please make sure to subscribe, click the bell, leave a comment, like, share, do all that kind of YouTube-y stuff, and we will see you again next week.